The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch didn't just become a hit, it became the History Channel's crown jewel. 6 seasons, 6 years of disciplined investigation, real science, real data, real PhD researchers confronting something that refused to behave by the laws of physics. Season 7 began filming in April 2024. Episodes rolled out weekly. The momentum was building, and then, after episode 7, everything stopped. No trailer, no announcement, no statement, just silence. 4 months of total radio silence from Brandon Fugal and the entire team. No interviews, no updates, nothing. Fans weren't just curious, they were alarmed. Where is Season 7? Subscribe, because yesterday, Brandon finally broke that silence. And what he revealed was not a scheduling delay, not a creative pause. It was something far more serious. Dr. Travis Taylor was hospitalized following exposure to what sources described as life-threatening radiation levels. The team had reportedly uncovered an underground chamber 147 feet below the surface, containing what was described as ancient anomalous technology. Shortly after the EPA intervened, the site was quarantined, insurance coverage was revoked, production was halted immediately. This wasn't a mid-season break. This was an emergency shutdown. And now, Brandon says he's ready to tell the full story, what really happened beneath the mesa, and why Season 7 vanished without a trace. When The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch premiered on March 31, 2020, it didn't ease into cultural relevance. It detonated onto the ratings chart as the History Channel's highest-rated series. Behind it was Brandon Fugal, Utah real estate magnate, who purchased the infamous 512-acre ranch in 2016 for $4.5 million. But he didn't buy it as a thrill-seeker. He bought it as a controlled experiment. He assembled a team that was impossible to dismiss. Dr. Travis Taylor, astrophysicist, aerospace engineer, Pentagon consultant involved in classified UAP programs. Eric Bard, principal investigator and geologist. Thomas Winterton, ranch superintendent living full-time on the property. Caleb Bench, operations manager, heavy equipment specialist. And for Season 7, Brandon added Dr. Jim Segala, a physicist specializing in radiation monitoring, replacing departing personnel and strengthening the scientific oversight. What separated this series from typical paranormal television wasn't atmosphere, it was methodology. These weren't hobbyists waving EMF meters in the dark. These were credentialed scientists applying peer-reviewed protocols, calibrated instruments, military-grade radar systems, and multi-layered verification processes. Brandon invested more than $2 million per year into research alone. Claims weren't aired casually. Phenomena were cross-checked, measured, logged, and repeated. Unidentified aerial phenomena tracked on advanced radar arrays. Radiation spikes recorded on calibrated dosimeters. Electromagnetic anomalies independently verified. GPS time discrepancies documented again and again. Cattle health monitored by licensed veterinarians after unexplained incidents. And with each season, the investigation escalated. Season 1 established environmental baselines. Season 2 began controlled drilling operations. Season 3 intensified the mesa excavations with larger-scale equipment. Season 4 shifted heavy focus to the triangle, the most active region on the property. Season 5 identified a subsurface cavity using ground-penetrating radar, something hollow beneath solid rock. Season 6 pushed deeper, and then came Season 7, the season that, according to Brandon, went further than any before it, and may have triggered consequences no one was prepared for. Season 6 was different. The team wasn't just studying the phenomenon anymore, they were pushing it. Every year the investigations became more aggressive, deeper drilling, bigger rockets, heavier equipment. It felt like they were building towards something significant that was getting closer. And by the end of Season 6, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. Radiation levels were steadily rising in certain areas of the ranch. Team members were being physically affected. Travis developed unexplained burns on his skin after specific experiments. Eric began suffering severe headaches after investigations in certain locations. High-end scientific equipment started failing at an alarming rate. Calibrated instruments were destroyed without explanation. And the UAP activity, it wasn't just increasing, it appeared responsive. Objects showed up during experiments, maneuvered during rocket launches, almost as if something was reacting to the team's presence. By this point, Brandon Fugal had invested over $12 million into the ranch since buying it in 2016, with millions more spent on advanced research systems, radiation monitoring equipment, and top scientific personnel. And he had built his reputation on one promise. We'll show everything we find. No hype, no exaggeration, just data. Season 7 was supposed to be the breakthrough. Planning began in early 2024 for the most ambitious excavation in the show's history, targeting a metallic anomaly detected 150 feet beneath Homestead 2. Ground-penetrating radar had revealed a signature that was clear, metallic, structured, not natural. Previous drilling attempts at this location had failed mysteriously. Equipment broke, systems malfunctioned. This time, they escalated. A larger commercial drill rig, reinforced components, enhanced radiation monitoring. Travis made it clear we're reaching that anomaly. The major excavation was scheduled for May 2nd and 3rd, 2024, a 2-day intensive operation. The entire team was on site. Brandon supervising, Dr. Travis Taylor leading, Eric Bard coordinating excavation, Dr. Jim Segala monitoring radiation, Thomas Winterton handling logistics, Caleb Bench operating the drill, 12 people total, full camera crew, radiation badges issued, safety protocols reviewed. Drilling began at 8 a.m. by noon, 50 feet by 4 p.m., 100 feet. Excitement was building. After years of speculation, they believed they were finally about to reach whatever had been hidden below for centuries. Then at 4:30 p.m., the first alarm sounded. Radiation levels began climbing, from the normal 0.1 millisieverts to 0.5, not immediately dangerous, but increasing, and the rise matched the drill depth exactly. Dr. Segala looked up from his monitors. We're getting close to something. There was a pause. Travis made the call. Keep drilling. At 5:47 p.m., at 147 feet deep, the drill suddenly lost resistance and dropped. The rig jolted as the bit punched through solid rock into empty space. A cavity. Silence. Then realization. They had breached something, and whatever was down there was no longer sealed. By the time Travis was stabilized in the hospital, word had already started spreading. Radiation logs were reviewed, exposure data was flagged, and within hours, federal authorities were notified. The numbers were too high, the pattern was too unusual. By the next morning, officials from the Environmental Protection Agency were on their way to the ranch. Unannounced, unscheduled, and not there for a friendly visit. When they arrived, the tone changed immediately. Independent radiation sweeps were conducted across Homestead 2. Soil samples were taken. Air quality was tested. The drill site was scanned from multiple angles, and the readings were still elevated. Not 1,000 millisieverts, but far above natural background, enough to raise serious concern. The EPA made their position clear. The site could not remain active. The drilled shaft was ordered sealed. The area was placed under restricted access. Temporary quarantine procedures were implemented around Homestead 2. No further excavation, no additional drilling, no exceptions. Then came the next blow. The ranch's insurance provider was notified of the radiation exposure incident, a life-threatening occupational hazard, documented on camera. Within days, coverage was suspended pending investigation. Without insurance, production could not legally continue. No network would assume that liability. Filming stopped immediately, cameras powered down, crew dismissed, security tightened. And for the first time since the series began in 2020, operations at Skinwalker Ranch were forced to halt. Not because of ratings, not because of creative differences, but because a federal agency had stepped in, and whatever was uncovered 147 feet below the surface was now officially classified as a public safety risk. Brandon went silent, no press releases, no interviews, no social media updates, just 4 months of total silence. Fans thought it was a hiatus. It wasn't. It was containment. And the biggest question wasn't whether Season 7 would continue. It was this: what exactly did they drill into? That required federal intervention. The long-term effects were completely unknown. Travis would require a minimum of 72 hours under intensive observation. It could be days. It could be weeks. At 9 p.m., Brandon arrived at the hospital, overwhelmed. This is my responsibility. He repeated it over and over. Travis was investigating Brandon's property, following Brandon's directives. I put him in danger right there in the hospital corridor. Brandon made the call. Production stops, effective immediately. Back at the ranch, the rest of the team was screened for exposure. Eric Bard, 150 millisieverts. Dr. Jim Segala, 180, both well above safe annual limits. Not immediately fatal, but serious. They were admitted overnight for monitoring and released 24 hours later. The camera crew had minimal exposure, positioned farther from the shaft, and were cleared the same night. Then came the hardest call. Travis's wife Karen was notified. She flew in from Alabama, where the family lives. Their children were told their father, a PhD physicist, aerospace engineer, Pentagon consultant, was hospitalized from radiation exposure while investigating Skinwalker Ranch. The reality hit differently at home. The 72-hour critical window began. Blood work every hour, cell counts monitored constantly. Travis's white blood cell count began dropping, a sign of bone marrow damage. Day 2, relentless nausea. Day 3, slight improvement. Day 4, stabilization. He was finally released after 6 days. But this wasn't over. Long-term monitoring would continue for months, possibly years. Doctors warned of permanent elevated cancer risk, possible fertility complications, potential cognitive effects that might not show up for years. And back at the ranch, the crisis was still unfolding. The drill shaft remained open. Radiation levels at the hole were still reading over 500 millisieverts. The contamination radius extended roughly 50 feet. The camera equipment was still down there, too dangerous to retrieve. Brandon gave the order, seal it. Immediately, concrete trucks arrived within hours. Through the night, the entire 147-foot shaft was filled. By sunrise, the hole was gone, buried, as if it had never existed. But it had. The EPA was formally notified, as required by law for any radiation release. They arrived the next morning. Full assessment, soil samples, water testing across the property. The contamination was localized to the drill site. The rest of the ranch showed no elevated readings. But the EPA confirmed something unsettling. The radiation signature included artificial isotopes, not consistent with natural geology, more consistent with technology. One official reportedly asked, "What exactly did you hit down there?" Brandon didn't have an answer. A 100-foot quarantine zone was established around the sealed site. Yellow tape, radiation warning placards, no entry for a minimum of 30 days while decay rates were monitored. For the first time in its history, Skinwalker Ranch was partially shut down. The film crew was shaken, not because of ratings, not because of controversy, but because they had watched a colleague collapse in front of them. Whatever was buried beneath Homestead 2 was no longer theory, and now the federal government was involved. Travis almost died, that's what the crew kept saying, and for some of them that was enough. Several quit immediately. Not worth it. The remaining crew demanded stricter safety protocols, or they would walk too. Union involvement was mentioned. For the first time, the production itself was in jeopardy. Thomas Winterton, who lives on the ranch with his family, was shaken. Is my family safe? Radiation monitors were immediately installed at Homestead 1, his residence. Readings were checked hourly. He seriously considered evacuating his family from the property. Caleb Bench, who operated the drill, checked his badge. 75 millisieverts. Above normal, below life-threatening, but high enough to raise questions. As a young man who wants a family someday, he had one thought. Is this worth risking my future? On May 4th, just 2 days after the incident, Brandon faced a decision. Travis was stable, but still hospitalized. The EPA had established a quarantine zone. The crew was threatening to quit. Insurance was calling. History Channel was calling. Continue production or shut everything down. Within 24 hours, Brandon was legally required to report the incident to the insurance company. The report was blunt: radiation exposure injury, workers' compensation triggered. Travis's medical bills were already climbing, potentially $500,000 or more. An insurance investigator was dispatched immediately. They arrived May 5th. Every team member was interviewed, radiation badges reviewed, safety protocols examined, all footage of the incident requested, and the central question became unavoidable. Who authorized continuing the drill? Dr. Segala had clearly warned them to stop. Travis insisted on continuing. Brandon allowed it. From a liability standpoint, that mattered. On May 8th, a letter arrived. Coverage suspended pending investigation. The reason? Reckless endangerment. Intentional exposure to a known hazard voided the policy. Season 7 now had zero insurance coverage. None. Brandon's financial exposure became enormous overnight. Travis's mounting medical bills could now become Brandon's personal responsibility. And if Travis chose to sue for negligence, damages could reach into the millions. Possibly more. History Channel called daily. What's the status? When can filming resume? Brandon explained. Insurance suspended. EPA quarantine. Team member hospitalized. The network's response was immediate. Pause production. Attorneys were hired. Their assessment was blunt. You are extremely exposed, potential legal consequences included. reckless endangerment, environmental violations, OSHA violations. Their advice? Stop all operations immediately. Then OSHA launched its own investigation triggered by the hospitalization. An inspector arrived May 10th. They reviewed radiation protocols, emergency response procedures, medical preparedness. Multiple violations were cited. Fines totaled $75,000. On May 12th, Travis formally filed a workers' compensation claim, medical costs, lost wages, ongoing treatment, potential long-term disability, the total claim, $2.3 million. At this point, Brandon wasn't just managing a production crisis. He was facing legal, financial, and reputational collapse. And the question wasn't whether Season 7 could continue. It was whether Skinwalker Ranch had just ended everything. Between May 10th and May 15th, everything came down to one question. Is the discovery worth another life? Brandon barely slept. Every scenario ended the same way. Continue drilling and risk another exposure. Seal it permanently and bury what might be the most significant discovery in modern history. The attorneys were clear. You are one incident away from criminal liability. Insurance was gone. OSHA fines were issued. The EPA quarantine remained active. Travis's $2.3 million claim was pending. And if long-term health complications developed, that number could multiply. History Channel was no longer asking when filming would resume. They were asking whether it ever could. Privately, network executives made their position clear: no insurance, no production. And even if insurance could somehow be reinstated, premiums would skyrocket, waivers would be required, radiation specialists on site at all times, federal oversight. The ranch would no longer be an experiment. It would be a controlled hazard zone. Then came the moral fracture. Brandon visited Travis again before he was discharged. Travis, pale but determined, said something that made the decision harder. We were close. From a hospital bed, after nearly dying, he still wanted answers. He believed the discovery justified the risk. But Brandon saw something else. He saw Travis's family in the waiting room. He saw the radiation badge turn black. He saw the liability report describing reckless continuation despite escalating radiation warnings. And he asked himself the question no billionaire investor wants to face. If someone dies next time, can I live with that? On May 15th, 2024, Brandon called an emergency meeting. Core team only, no cameras, no producers, just the scientists and operational leads. He laid it out plainly. We found something extraordinary. Silence filled the room. But we crossed a line. He acknowledged the warnings. He acknowledged the decision to continue drilling. He acknowledged the consequences. And then he said it. Effective immediately, all deep excavation operations are permanently suspended, not paused, suspended, indefinitely. The sealed chamber would remain sealed. No attempt would be made to reopen it without federal authorization, third-party oversight, and medical-grade containment infrastructure. Season 7 production was officially halted. Not because of ratings, not because of pressure, but because the risk calculus had changed. The ranch had pushed back, and it pushed back hard enough to nearly kill someone. The announcement was not made publicly, not yet. Lawyers needed to structure the language. Insurance negotiations needed to conclude. Workers' compensation claims needed resolution. But internally, the decision was final. The aggressive era experimentation was over. Skinwalker Ranch would never be investigated the same way again. And for the first time since 2020, Brandon wasn't asking what's down there. He was asking whether some things are meant to stay buried. The arguments against continuing were just as powerful. Travis had nearly died. Insurance was gone. Legal exposure was massive. The crew was threatening to quit. The EPA had restricted access to the most important discovery in the ranch's history. On May 12th, a full team meeting was held. Travis joined by video call from his hospital bed. He looked weak, but determined. Brandon asked the question directly. Do we continue? Travis didn't hesitate. This is why we're here. This could be the most important discovery in paranormal history. We can't stop now. Then he paused. I almost died. My family is terrified. That tension hung in the air. Eric proposed a compromise. Continue, but remotely. Better protocols, more shielding, no direct human exposure. Dr. Segala was blunt. Radiation levels are too high. We cannot safely investigate without specialized containment equipment. That takes months to acquire. Then he said the line that shifted the room. If you rush this, someone dies. Thomas Winterton spoke next. My family lives here. Is the ranch safe? Should we evacuate? For the first time, the mystery wasn't theoretical. It was domestic. Meanwhile, History Channel was calling. Daily. We need a timeline. Brandon's response stayed the same. Safety first. I don't know when we can resume. The financial reality was brutal. Brandon had invested over $14 million total. Season 7 alone carried a $3 million budget. $1.2 million had already been spent. Stopping now meant absorbing massive losses. Continuing meant risking lawsuits, lives, possibly criminal charges. On May 15, 2024, Brandon made the decision. Not as a producer, not as an investor, as a human being, halt production. Indefinitely, I cannot, in good conscience, put my team at risk for a television show. Money isn't worth lives. That afternoon, he called History Channel. We're stopping. Effective immediately, silence on the other end. For how long? Until it's safe. I don't know when. The network pushed back. We need to discuss this. Brandon's response was firm, non-negotiable. Episode 7 aired May 21st, 2024. And then, nothing. Weeks of reruns followed. No announcement, no explanation, just silence. To viewers, it looked like a programming gap. Behind the scenes, it was the moment the ranch forced everyone to choose between discovery and survival. Legal counsel stepped in immediately. The entire team was instructed to remain silent. No interviews, no posts, no hints. Brandon stopped posting altogether. The silence was intentional. Online speculation exploded. Was the show canceled? Was someone seriously injured? Did they finally find something too dangerous to air? Some of the theories were closer to the truth than anyone realized. Travis was released May 8th and returned home to Alabama. He was alive, but not the same. Fatigue lingered. Headaches persisted. His blood counts improved slowly, week by week. Insurance negotiations dragged on through the summer. Medical bills climbed to $680,000. Brandon paid personally while disputes continued. The EPA extended the quarantine from 30 days to 90. The sealed site remained off-limits. Radiation monitoring continued. Privately, Brandon wrestled with it all. Was it worth it? The discovery, the risk, the cost. Then yesterday, he finally spoke publicly. No vague statements, no deflection. He laid it out plainly. Travis's radiation exposure, the underground chamber, the metallic structure, the glowing central object, the insurance denial, the EPA involvement, the shutdown, safety over content. He confirmed Travis has largely recovered, but the elevated cancer risk remains for life. Insurance finally settled in August. Under strict conditions, the EPA lifted the quarantine on September 15th. The drill site, however, will remain permanently sealed. Season 7 officially ended at Episode 7. No hidden episodes. No secret finale. Just a hard stop. Season 8 has been greenlit for January 2025, but under new rules, mandatory medical personnel on site. Strict radiation exposure limits, real-time monitoring, no drilling without federal permits, no aggressive excavation without layered containment protocols. Brandon ended with a reflection that felt different than before. I pushed too hard. Travis paid the price. He could have died. We found something incredible, but it nearly killed us. Season 8 is coming, but we'll be more careful. Then he said something that lingered. Whatever's down there has waited millennia. It can wait until we're ready. And for the first time, the mystery didn't feel like something to conquer. It felt like something that had already made its point.